I think we'll get started. Hello, everyone. I'm David Moeller, Representative Secretary Monica Tibbetts Nutt here. Welcome to a meeting of the Boston Region Metropolitan Planning Organization. Before we start, since we're not often in this room, bathrooms are right out that door. Everybody has a mic. The mics are only good for 3 hours, 3 to 5 hours. So if for some reason your mic stops working, staff has very kindly taped. You'll see two batteries in front of you. Just raise your hand and staff will help you change your batteries, or, you know, maybe if you're technologically sound, you can change your own batteries. With that, can we put the first slide up that I'm supposed to read? Is this a virtual meeting?
Yes, it's a hybrid.
Right, it's hybrid, right? Oh, I can't read that from here. I'm gonna come close and read it. There you go. Yeah. Thank you, David. You are invited to participate in our transportation planning process, regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status or background. You can read the full notice of your rights and protections at www.boston_MPO.org/MPO_PISCRIMINATION. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, or if you have any technical difficulties, please contact Abby Katrums Harima of the MPO staff at ACUTRUMBES@ctps.org or 857-702-3682 or via the chat box. All participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. After roll call, board members may mute and unmute themselves. Always remain muted unless actively speaking. To participate in the discussion, Thank you. To participate in the discussion, please select the raise hand function. Find this by clicking either on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and a window will pop up with a raise hand button at the bottom, or the reactions button in the toolbar. The chair will then call on participants. If you're on the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand.
Thank you everyone for joining us today. Just a quick announcement. Members, you'll find microphones placed in front. Each has a mute and an unmute button. Additionally, typical battery life is 2 to 3 hours. You'll find, if you find green lights blinking between green and red, there are spare batteries taped to your desks. Feel free to use them to replace. If you need assistance, staff will be ready to help you. With that, Mr. Chair, shall I call the roll?
Yes, please, David.
Thank you. MassDOT seat 1.
This is David Moeller. I'm here.
MassDOT seat 2.
John Bashad representing Highway Administrator Jonathan Gulliver, present.
MassDOT Highway Division. The MBTA.
Josh Ostroff, representing General Manager Phil Eng and the MBTA.
Regional Transportation Authorities, Metro West Transit Authority.
Good morning. This is Tyler Tarasi representing Administrator Jim Nee for the MWRTA. Present.
We'll also call on MAPC.
Good morning, Eric Barassa with MAPC.
MBTA Advisory Board,
Good morning, Hannah Switlikowski, MBTA Advisory Board.
the Advisory Council,
Leonard Diggins Advisory Council here.
right? City of Boston, seat 1. City of Boston, seat 2. At-large city, City of Everett.
Good morning, Jay Monty, representing Mayor Di Maria in the city of Everett.
At-large city, City of Newton. At-large town, Town of Arlington.
This is John Alessi representing Select Board Chair Steve DeCoursey in the town of Arlington.
At-large town, Town of Brookline.
Good morning, Erin Chute, representing Select Board Chair Bernard Green, Town of Brookline.
Next is the Inner Core Committee, City of Somerville.
Good morning, Tom Ben, representing Mayor Tatiana Valentine.
Minuteman Advisory Group on Interlocal Coordination, Town of Acton.
Good morning, Christine Gichard, representing Select Board Chair Fran Arsenal, for the United States.
Metro West Regional Collaborative, City of Framingham.
Dennis Giambetti, representing Metro West, and Mayor Charles Ziski. Sorry I could not join you in person this morning.
Not a problem. Welcome, Dennis. Just for those speaking on the microphones, we have, I think, extremely large sound differential between, and so you can speak softly. Thank you. The North Shore Task Force, City of Beverly.
Darlene Nguyen, representing Mayor Michael Cahill, for the North Shore Task Force.
Thank you. North Suburban Planning Council, Town of Burlington.
Yes, Melissa Tintopoulos, representing the North Suburban Planning Council from Burlington.
South Shore Coalition, Town of Hull.
Chris Diorio representing Hull Select Board Chair Erwin Nessa for the South Shore Coalition.
Southwest Advisory Planning Committee, Town of Rentham.
Rachel Benson, designee for Rentham, representing Southwest Advisory Planning.
Three Rivers Interlocal Council, Town of Norwood.
Steve Olenoff, representing the Trick Subregion, Town of Norwood.
Great. And the final two, the Federal Highway Administration. Welcome. Anthony, would you just mention your last name? Is it Anthony Charles?
Jones.
Jones, thank you. And then the Federal Transit Administration. With that, that calls the roll. Is there anyone else I have not called?
Sarah Lee from Massport is also here.
Sarah, welcome and thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? With that, that calls the roll. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dave. Next item on the agenda is the chair's report. I will just give a quick update on where we are with the extension of the open meeting law. So I believe it's been passed by both houses and it's on its way to the governor for a 2-year extension. If that gets signed, then the open meeting law will be extended for 2 more, the exemption to the open meeting law will be extended for 2 more years. If not, for some reason, the governor decided not to sign it or to veto it, staff would be in touch to let you know what your responsibilities are as members, but everything's looking positive. Can't speak for the governor, of course, but everything's moving forward. Any questions on that? Seeing none, next item on the agenda is the executive director's report. Taken.
Thank you, David. Hello, everyone. I'm the Executive Director of the Boston Region MPO staff. My name is Tegan Tyke, and I'll provide a report today. If you could go to. So first, I'd like to provide an update about staff member and research to you, and then I'd like to give you an engagement update, and then I'll give a preview of today's agenda, what we're hoping to accomplish, and then highlight what's coming for the next year. But before I start, I do also just want to call out and thank the staff members of the MPO who worked very hard to set up this meeting today. Some of you may remember, if it's 5 years ago now, we used to meet in this room every single meeting. So this is sort of reminiscent for some of us. And also, this room is not equipped in advance with hybrid meeting capabilities, so we have set all this up. Please bear with us if there are technical difficulties, but I just want to emphasize there's a lot of work that went in behind the scenes, and also the staff is in front of you today. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. So today I wanted to introduce, actually, look who's in the room. Oh, good, there you are. Thank you, Jen. I wanted to introduce to you all our new manager of the multimodal planning and design group. We've been here from a lot at this board. Jen Kaplan joined us just last week as the new manager of this group, and so we just wanted her to say hello and give you a face and a voice for the name, as you'll see her more in the coming months, and I hope yes.
Work. Morning, everyone. Thank you, Tegan. My name is Jenna Miko Kaplan. I go by Jen. I'm going to be the new manager of multimodal planning and design. I'm really excited to be here. I come into the role with experience in both private and public agencies, some that are familiar to many of you, like MAPC and BPDA, where I led multidisciplinary teams where access and mobility were huge challenges in our growing communities in the region. So I'll be leading the team and taking the charge on making sure that we're building amazing regional and community multimodal projects. Thank you.
I've been asked to speak more directly into the mic, so I think that's going to be a request from all of us. So please be aggressive for your microphone, just to make sure that we are accessible to those who are online and people in the room. So that, let's go to the next slide. So you may recall a number of months ago, we presented to the board
Sunsetting and then restructuring of the MPO's advisory body, which was called the Regional Transportation Advisory Council. We've been continuing that work since we last gave you that update. And I also just wanted to highlight that Len Diggins, who is remote today, continues to participate on this board so that there's no sort of gap in terms of that coverage while we work on the restructuring process. We've been working recently on things like the group's charter, what that should look like, what membership should look like, how to incentivize membership, and what meeting content should look like once we relaunch that group. What I wanted to do is preview this for you all and say that we will want to come to you all, even though it's a very busy time in the next couple of board meetings, and give you another update on where that stands. So just kind of wanted you all to be ready and aware of that coming and be ready to engage in a conversation, as this is an important advisory body that is set up in the MOU for this MPO. Next slide, please. Next slide. So today's agenda, we do have sort of a two-part agenda since it is a longer meeting with a break in between. In the first part of the agenda, this is after the usual business. We will have a presentation from Priyanka Chapekar, who is the program manager for the congestion management process. And what she will do is present to you all a set of objectives that have been developed through collaboration with the CMP committee. And the idea is that the board can review and we hope establish those objectives, vote to approve those objectives as a basis for the CMP work going forward. So that will be an action item for you all. Next, we will also hear from our regional transit authorities, Metro West and Cape Ann, on their capital investment plans. As a reminder, when you all are thinking about the tip for each year, you are not only thinking about the scenarios for the MPO selected and prioritized projects, but also approving federal funding that is coming in through MassDOT, the MBTA, and the RTAs into that tip. So these capital investment plan presentations are very important to give you a sense of how those agencies are working through their capital needs and then prioritizing those projects for input into the tip, which you will vote on in the coming month. Then after the break, we will focus on those MPO selected and prioritized projects. We will talk about the preliminary project programming scenarios for the 26 to 30 tip. What we will be asking you to do today is to deliberate what you see in those scenarios and the updated information we're able to give you, to lean towards one or ideally one or some combination of those scenarios to guide us forward so that we have really clear input from you all to move towards a next honing down of those scenarios with both the TIP committee next week and then come back in 2 weeks with a final scenario for this group to consider. Next slide, please. There are a number of printouts that are in front of board members today to have that scenario conversation, both a high-level scenario, a summary of the scenarios, as well as a detailed document about those scenarios. There are also packets of project descriptions that look like this color packet right here. You would be sharing one for every several of you because they're larger printouts. So please share those with each other as you need them at the table. Next slide, please. And then the next meeting, I just want to remind you all, we will continue this conversation. It will again have an in-person option, which we encourage you all to attend in person. It will be April 3rd at 10 a.m. Next time it will be in the Transportation Boardroom. So drink your coffee before you get to the meeting because we're not allowed to have liquid in there. So just a reminder. And we will look forward to continuing another robust conversation with you at that meeting about capital investment plans and the TIP scenarios that we're discussing today. That's it.
Thank you, Tegan. Any questions for Tegan? Seeing.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Matt Taylor, Vice Chair of the Belmont Select Board. It's good to see you all. I'm here today to support the Belmont Community Path as part of the FY26 TIP. We are working hard to design the tunnel that will cut under the underpass to meet the connectivity and design guidelines that the MBTA has recommended to us. So we have a plan to work forward to finish the design for the tunnel. Let me tell you, this tunnel under the tracks is an important part of the connectivity for our town. The train bisects our town and makes it hard for the neighborhood on one side of the tracks to reach the middle school, high school that's on the other side of the tracks. And so this will be an important safety feature. And of the things that I've talked about with my neighbors across town, this is the thing that gets 98% of agreement. We really want to see this happen. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to even have this path. It's a vital part of the Mass Central Rail Trail. It will connect the Fitchburg cutoff to Belmont Center. We're redesigning some zoning for Belmont Center to take our cute, quaint center town to be a wonderful place that you can walk or bike to. We have our age-friendly action plan committee is engaged with this to make sure the path is suitable for all uses and all ages. So I hope you will give it deep consideration, and we're grateful for your support on the Belmont Community Path. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Holly Muson. I'm the chair of the Belmont Community Path Project Committee, which is comprised of volunteers, residents of the town of Belmont. And I'm here to thank the MPO for programming phase 1 of the Belmont Community Path on the FY26 TIP. We're deeply grateful for your support and for the work that all of the agencies here are doing to support this type of work. Thank you. I have to say that the most frequently asked question that we get as a committee is, when will this path be done? People are very anxious for this kind of project to be in place and completed, and thank you for doing this.
Thank you. I'm State Senator Will Brownsberger. I represent Belmont, Watertown, Brighton, Alston, Fenway, and part of Cambridge. And I'm speaking on behalf of myself and also on behalf of Representative Rogers, who represents Belmont, North Cambridge, and a bit of Arlington. So this path lies in my district and in Representative Rogers' district. And I just wanted to express my gratitude and my personal absolute commitment to helping this project stay on track. The most challenging element of it is this underpass. It's what has sort of delayed us to getting to this point. You know, we had to go through a lot of process to get to the point of being on the tip. And it's the one that we're watching most closely. I did have a conversation with General Manager Eng this morning, and I was grateful for his commitment to provide us an expediter to, as we go through the final strokes of the 75% design process and 100% design process, just to make sure that we have no unnecessary delays. And so we're very, very committed to keeping this project on the 26 tip and being ready to benefit from the funding that you, in your wisdom, have so far provided to us. And we thank you for that.
Thank you, Senator. Is there any other elected official who would like to speak before I go to the general list?
I would.
Okay, could you please introduce yourself because I can't see the Zoom from here?
Hi, folks. I'm State Representative Michelle Socolo from the 15th Middlesex District, and I represent Lexington, Woburn, and Winchester. I want to add my gratitude to all of you who work so hard on the TIP process and the long-range transportation plan, all the members and the staff. It's heartwarming to see our processes actually work here in Massachusetts. And I know many of you have been at this for decades and decades, and it's just wonderful to see the work continue. I'm here to support two projects in Lexington, Project 613695, the Bedford and Hartwell Complete Streets Reconstruction Project. For those who may be following what's going on in Lexington, we were one of the first communities to vote our MBTA zoning, and are thrilled to see that we have quite a few units in the pipeline. It's been a bumpy ride to some degree, but we have more than 1,200 units in the pipeline. And in this corridor alone, we have, I think it's 450 plus a biotech facility that's 6 stories coming online, and a number of other retail and smaller commercial projects. So the corridor is vital. It connects all of our neighboring communities. I did submit a letter that you can look at, and I know that there are several other folks in the audience today and online that will speak to the specifics of the project. But I want to thank you for your ongoing support and ask that you program it in the FY 26 to 30 Transportation Improvement Program. The other project is the related adjacent highway interchange with Bridge, which is project S12978. And, you know, it goes without saying that completing the corridor project at Hartwell and Bedford Street, where we also, by the way, have 20,000 workers at Hanscom Air Force Base and MIT Lincoln Labs. The interchange itself and the bridge itself also are in dire need of being upgraded. And to do the planning without looking at both projects together really doesn't make sense. They need to be coordinated, and the studies all need to be evaluated in the context of both going forward to upgrade the whole corridor. So again, I thank you for letting me speak and taking me out of turn, and I appreciate all the work that you do. Thanks.
Thank you, Representative. Next person signed up is
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Andreas Wolf. My role is a street design project manager at the City of Cambridge. I'm here today to speak in support of including roughly $2 million in the FY 26 TIP for the city's Cambridge Street Safety Improvement Project. This is a vital project that will improve safety in Cambridge and help towards our sustainability goals of completing the city's bicycle network vision. So thank you.
and Rich, introduce yourself at the mic, please.
Hey, good morning. Rich Benevento. I'm with Ty and Bond. I'm representing several communities this morning, and I wasn't quite sure if I should give updates now or when we get into the TIP programming discussion, but seeing as how I'm standing here, I'll do it right now. So a few projects were flagged for the next TIP element. I have had some discussions with Program Manager LaPointe, but I did want to give some updates to the projects that were actually flagged. First one was Brookline. It was not in bold, but it was in red type, which essentially had some concerns relative to its readiness. And we know that in the whole program scenario, and hats off to everybody who's been trying to do that, it's all about TIP readiness. Brookline, and we have Commissioner Shute here this morning, as well as Design Review Committee Chairman Kane. The town of Brookline went through a very robust public process to get the project advanced, and we've been through that. The ice stages have been approved, and we're happy to report that the 25% design submission is scheduled for this coming September. And with the design public hearing in March of next year, PS&E submission in October. So we're very confident that the project can remain in federal fiscal year 28 for advertising during that federal fiscal year. So the project is advancing expeditiously. there's incredible town support for the project, given the public process that went on in Brookline. And I know Ethan had attended a couple of the meetings. Certainly Chairman Kane has been there. Commissioner, I don't know if you want to add anything as well, but that project is advancing. And we have every confidence that the project will be available for the FY28 TIP cycle. Next project that was, there were two projects in Lynn that were flagged, and I would like to also report on those. The first one was Essex Street. Essex Street was, it was requested that suggested that project move from FY27 to FY28. I'm here to represent Aaron Clausen, a principal planner, and Mayor Nicholson, who have had discussions about this project, and they are in support of advancing the project or moving the project to FY28. The 25% submission is currently finished. It's going through QA/QC and will be submitted to Mass DOT next week. So we know that the 25% design submission will go in. The design public hearing is tentatively scheduled for this fall, September of 25. And an anticipated PS&E submission in November of 28. So that extra year moving from FY27 to FY28 actually supports the concerns of trying to establish right-of-way and get the right-of-way certificate. I try to explain to cities and towns, whether it's September of 27 or it's October of 27, moving in a federal fiscal year, it's still generally the same spring construction start effectively. So the city is okay with advancing that project to FY28. The other project in Lynn that was also flagged is the Weston Ave project. If anyone is familiar with that project, an incredibly regionally significant project. It's a large project, very complex project. There's been several meetings with Mass DOT. There's been several meetings with the MBTA relative to bus routes and consolidation of bus stops and things of that nature. Both ICE Stage 1 and ICE Stage 2 have been approved. The 25% submission is scheduled for July of this year, just in a few months, with a design public hearing scheduled for January of next year. So that project is moving forward. I understand that project was also flagged to be moved out of the current federal fiscal year of 28, and I believe to move to 29. Again, the city is in support of that as well. There are other projects here that I could speak about, but those are the ones that were flagged. City planner John Cashel is here from the city of Woburn for the Woburn Center project. So if there's any questions when we get to that discussion later on, we're happy to provide additional information, as well as Jay Monty, because we're also here to represent Beecham Street in Everett. Those projects were not flagged, thankfully, and everything is moving expeditiously on those as well. So
Thank you, Mr. Benevento. Is there anyone else in the room who would like to speak at this time? Seeing none, is there anyone online who would like to speak? Seeing and hearing none. Thank you.
Yes,
Sorry.
David.
Yep.
I'm sorry, yes.
Yes.
Please introduce yourself.
Hi, sorry, I can't see or hear much in the room. This is Steve Barth. I'm the Lexington Town Manager, and I think I might have just cut somebody else off, so I can wait if that person's ready to go.
Is there
Otherwise,
someone that could go maybe in the order of the hands?
I took mine down. I could put it back up.
Staff, I have no control. I can't see anything. So somebody's got to tell me who to call on first. You,
Let me go. I'll be brief. Sorry, and again, I know how disruptive it is to have rogue Zoom callers messing with meetings, but I'll be short and sweet, and I probably won't say it any better than Representative Sicolo, but I'm the town manager in Lexington. My name is Steve Bartha, speaking in support of the Hartwell Bedford project. I believe you probably joined in person and online by either Megan McNamara and Ross Morrow, two excellent members of our engineering and planning departments in Lexington. We're excited about this project. As the representative said, we're out in front on building housing. We have more than 1,000 units in the pipeline, and this intersection is critical. This section is critical for us. As the representative said, we have housing that will be going up in the next 12 to 36 months there. So this will be in direct support of that. Our staff is ready to roll on this. Our engineering department oversees about $10 million a year in capital projects, in addition to about $1 million in Chapter 90 work. And we have a long, successful track record working with MassDOT and the Boston MPO. And we hope that you will support this project. Thank you very much.
David, you gonna lift people in order?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll recognize Christine Johnson, if that's okay.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the Boston MPO Board. For the record, my name is Christina Johnson, and I am the Director of Planning and Community Development for the town of Hudson. And I am truly delighted to be here to speak about the Mass Central Rail Trail. And I'm even more over the moon to see that our design pilot application for the next phase of the connection of the Mass Central Rail Trail has been included in all TIP scenarios. This is a really important project for the Commonwealth and is going to be connecting over 100 miles of rail trail. And Hudson is kind of the missing link here on the eastern end. We do have one segment that will be connecting into the Assabet River Rail Trail that is part of the Eversource transmission line program. And of course, we do have a legacy of rail trail development. And in fact, our prior speaker, Representative Sokolo, who is my predecessor, I consider her the godmother of rail trail development. And in fact, when I sat on this board, she was steadfast in her efforts to get that project designed and constructed. And it is no easy feat being in a small community to get these types of projects done. So first, I would like to thank the MPO board for setting up such a funding source for communities like myself who have no option to go to a town meeting in the midst of many fiscal cliffs and ask for design money. So this is so helpful for us to continue the momentum. I'd also like to thank the MPO staff, in particular the TIP manager, Ethan LaPont, who has been a godsend to us here. We are a two-person planning department who basically do everything, it seems, in the town, and has really helped us frame our application and get this project ready for consideration for TIP inclusion. And also, I'd like to give a huge shout out to the District 3 planning staff, Sarah Bradbury and Ann Sullivan, who again, very hands-on with us, helping us and our consultants get the PRC approval, help us phase our project, and help us mix other funding sources so that we can continue the momentum. This is a really important project. We need to finish the trail. I know there's sort of a public campaign called Finish the Trail, and Hudson is kind of the missing link. And I'm so delighted that the board is in support of these regional rail trails, whether it's through Hudson or anywhere in the Commonwealth. As somebody who biked on the Mass Central Rail Trail out in some of the western portions, this is going to be an incredible asset for the Commonwealth. And it's going to connect a lot of amazing, diverse communities, including Hudson, which, by the way, won Best Main Street in America in 2021. So folks that live in Boston or out in the western end can come and bike right into our amazing downtown. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak, and thank you so much for the support of this project.
Thank you, Kristen. Next, we'll recognize John Senna. If you can unmute.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, members of the committee. My name is John Shannon. I'm Director of Public Works and Capital Projects for the town of Linfield. With me and about to speak soon is our town administrator, Rob Dolan, as well. We're here this morning. We're very excited to be here this morning to support Phase 1 of the Linfield Rail Trail. This is a portion of our rail trail that we were able to accelerate. We have 100% plans in place with MassDOT through our consultant Stantec. This will connect our high school with our middle school. More importantly, it connects rail trails to our north in Peabody with rail trails to our south in Wakefield. We feel this is important not just for our community, but for the rail trail network in general. We've been working, there's a group of volunteers in town that have been working for this for nearly 2 decades. We feel there are environmental improvements that this project brings. There are improvements to passive recreation, and most importantly, to the value of the community. We really look forward and we're excited at the opportunity to construct this in fiscal 26 so that we can start to enjoy this phase of the rail trail while we remain committed to designing the second phase, which will connect us to Wakefield in the future. I believe Rob Dolan is on the call. If it's okay with, through the chair, I'd like to just pass it on to him for a few other words.
That's fine.
Thank you very much. This is Rob Dolan, Town Administrator of Linfield. I'll be very quick because I know you have a long day and a long number of decisions to make. So I'm here on behalf of the Linfield Board of Selectmen, who unanimously and fully support this project. A few years ago, we had a town meeting to ask for funding for this. It was the largest town meeting I have ever attended in my 8 years. Hundreds of people showed up with an overwhelming support of this project. It is not only about recreation, it's also about safety. We don't have a lot of sidewalks here in Linfield, and the safety measures of bringing young people from the middle school to the high school, both athletic fields and educationally, is a game changer for this town. We are 100% ready to get this job done and work with all of you to make sure it's done successfully as phase one, and you have the full support of Linfield government to make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you both. Next, we'll recognize J.R. Fry.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. J.R. Fry, Town of Hingham Town Engineer. I'm speaking in support of Project 605168. That's the Hingham Route 3A improvement. And just wanted to thank the MPO as well as the TIP Readiness Subcommittee for all their hard work on it. We've had a lot of great discussions with MassDOT headquarters as well as District 5, and we're really at a good place to continue moving the project forward. It's very encouraging. We don't have a particular opinion at this time on any of the scenarios that have been presented. But as we evaluate those and see how the project is fitting in schedule-wise, we may provide an opinion back. I want to take a moment also to thank our representative, Joe Machino, as well as Senator Patrick O'Connor for their advocacy on behalf of this project. It's a very important safety improvement for the corridor, and we're looking forward to getting this project completed as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, J.R. Next, we'll recognize Marzi Galaska.
Good morning, MPO members. My name is Marzi Galaska. I'm the Community Development Director for the town of Swampscott. I'm here this morning to speak in support of the Swampscott Rail Trail, which is project number 610666. The Swampscott Rail Trail is a 2-mile path, which is part of the Boston to Border path, and it's a critical link between the Northern Strand Community Path in Lynn and the Marblehead Trail. It is also a critical component to our off-road access to our schools and crosstown connection in Swampscott. We are fully committed to the project, and we continue to our working relationship with MassDOT and our consultants to design this trail and move it along. Thank you for your support.
Thank you, Marzi. Next, Bill Deanian.
Degnan.
Yep, Degnan. Hey, good morning. And thank you, Mr. Chair and the board, for having us here today. I'm Bill Degnan with the City of Cambridge. Sorry I can't join you in person today, but appreciate the time and just talking a little bit more about some Cambridge projects. First, I want to support my colleague Andreas Wolf, who spoke previously about the Cambridge Street Safety Improvement Project. that we're hoping that there's some money in FY 26 that might be available to complete that project in substitution for a congressional earmark that expires in FY 25. Having money in FY 26 would give us additional time to complete the design of a project on Cambridge Street in the amount of approximately $2 million. I also just wanted to mention, in the past, we have put in our Fitchburg Crossing bicycle pedestrian bridge that we won a Reconnecting Communities grant for the design of that, and hoping that in the future, the MPO could fund the construction of that in the kind of $15 to $20 million range, probably in the year more like FY 29 or something. We're right now trying to finish up the selection of a design team for that and move ahead. Also keeping in mind, the federal situation with grants. We do have a signed grant agreement with FHWA in a partial appropriation of that obligation of that funding. So we're watching that situation, but if you could keep that in mind in future scenarios, we'd appreciate it. And of course, we always appreciate the MPO's support of the Blue Bike system. Supported that for many years, and Cambridge appreciates the financial support for adding new stations to the system as well as replacing older stations. Obviously, many communities in the room are part of that system and know what a hugely successful regional system that has been in terms of transit options for the region. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. Those are the hands staff are seeing, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thanks, Dad. I apologize for the hiccup at the beginning to those of you online. Totally my fault. New room. Sorry about that. Next item is committee chairs. Are there any? Jen Rowe.
I'm happy to report that his process engagement and readiness meeting met on last Thursday, March 15th at 1 p.m. Good staff provided an update on project scoring. Because there was a very large volume of new project applications, staff were able to score for the older projects on what they had hoped to allow direct comparison with projects that have been scored in the last 2 years. This one makes it more difficult for us to assess how projects align with the MPO goals that we made programming decisions this year. So to be able to kind of set ourselves up in be in a better situation next year, that we may get this information from project proponents. They did present a couple of ways to go about doing that. I had a conversation short because before the committee reached a recommendation. So we're going to have to return that at a future meeting. Okay, we did it. So that was the rescoring agenda item. We also discussed the scenarios, the ones that before you today. Discussion centered around how these scenarios, while achieving the free, do continue our practice of delaying projects that haven't advanced in time. And have outdated process, and how this creates some domino effects on other projects, new little funding for new projects, and creates a great deal of risk for the overall program. Besides that, several committee members did express a few preferences for one or more scenarios, but the committee of the whole did not. The next meeting is in Thursday at 1, virtual, and there we will review and discuss any revisions to these scenarios.
Thank you, Jen. Any questions for Jen? Jay, you got your hand up? Wait, go ahead, Melissa, because I think Jay's going to comment on committee meeting.
Jen, just so I understand, in terms of the committee, it sounds like you've been discussing the scoring and then discussing kind of the scenarios, but then there's no recommendations on either of those. Could you help me understand? Because I would be looking to my committee to help me understand and guide.
Yeah, so I think as you'll see today, there's a lot of, I think, information for members to dive chat this. At first,
go around. Yeah, we weren't able to kind of get to scenarios. But yeah, it's time and content of so much stuff. Yeah, right? Yeah, and they did an amazing job. Yeah, no, I know, but that's what I have. We're both on their teams, so they're but yeah, we can.
Do you have a comment or you committee chair? I just have a committee chair report. All right, thanks, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to preview our CMP item this morning. So Priyanka Chipikar is working very hard on developing new CMP objectives. So this is really, I think, kind of a new direction for the CMP, taking a more holistic look at congestion management. In the past, I think it's been very focused on in-rickshaw data, which is really vehicle congestion, and we're really looking to move it more towards a holistic transit, bike ped, as well as vehicle, programs. So really excited for her report, and I want to thank everybody who's on the CMP committee for their work going to this, and hopefully we'll have some comments and thoughts as we discuss that later this morning. Thank you.
I'll go to the mic.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Clem. I work in MassDOT's Office of Transportation Planning. I hope you all can hear me online. The UPWP committee is expected to meet 3 times during the month of April. The first meeting will be held on April 3rd, where we will discuss the list of feasible study proposals that were submitted through the UPWP survey. We'll also meet on the following Thursday, April 10th, where we'll hold a discussion on the MPO's ongoing work program. And the final meeting in April will be April 17th. There we will discuss a final list of discrete study scenarios for FFY 2026. And we do expect all those meetings to be held in person at this time. And if that format is to change, the staff will contact committee members. Thank you.
Any questions? Any other committee reports at this time? Okay. It is the minute of February 2nd. Can I get a motion and a second to approve minutes as presented? Please state your name for the record.
Eric Barassa, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
Yeah.
Motion having been made and seconded. Any comments, changes, questions, or suggestions? Seeing and hearing none, please call the roll.
Call the roll. Starting with David Moeller,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano, Josh Ostroff,
Josh Ostroff, yes.
Tyler Terrassi,
Tyler Terrassi, yes.
Sarah Lee, I will return Eric Barassa, Hannes Wilikowski,
Hannes Wilikowski, yes.
Len Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
Jen Rowe, Nayeli Rodriguez, Jay Monty,
Hey, Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
John Alessi.
John Alessi, I'll abstain. I wasn't present.
Thank you. Next is Aaron Shute,
Aaron Shute, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Kristen Guichard, Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Nguyen,
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
Melissa Santopoulos,
Yeah.
Chris Diorio,
Chris Diorio, yes.
Rachel Benson,
Abstain.
abstained, Steve Olenoff.
Steve Olenoff, yes.
Do we have Sarah Lee to vote? With that motion carries. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Next item on the agenda, as congestion management process objective. Bianca, whenever you're ready.
Good morning, everyone. Everyone can hear me okay?
Is that better? All right. Good morning. My name is Priyanka Chapekar, and I'm the Congestion Management Process Program Manager with the MPO. And today I'll be presenting the newly proposed regional CMP objectives and request a vote of approval from the board. Next slide, please. All right, so a bit of background. The Congestion Management Process, or the CMP, is a federally required program for all transportation management areas with a population greater than 200,000. The Boston region, with a population of nearly 3.5 million, is therefore also required to have a CMP. Detailed guidelines for formulating CMPs are prescribed in a CMP guidebook published by the Federal Highway Administration, or FHWA. These federal guidelines define the CMP as a systematic and regionally accepted approach for managing congestion that provides accurate, up-to-date information on transportation system performance and assesses alternative strategies for congestion management that meet state and local needs. So this definition encourages the CMP to be a continuous and data-driven process rather than a set document. This process is meant to change over time according to changing needs measured through traffic performance measures, as well as changing goals and objectives of the regional transportation planning process. The CMP is updated as new data becomes available for evaluating new strategies for congestion mitigation. Going to the next slide. So for the Boston region specifically, the MPO staff have been working on a comprehensive CMP update since August 2024. The last full update to the CMP happened in 2004, after which there was work done in the form of multiple studies on evaluating performance measures, congested roadways, and more recently, in fall 2023, an analysis of existing roadway pricing schemes. This ongoing CMP update is an effort to study congestion trends holistically by reevaluating multimodal traffic performance and analyzing more recent and relevant data to eventually formulate recommendations for improvement. Per FHWA guidelines, CMP objectives are the first step in the 8-step CMP formulation process. Federal guidelines also dictate that the objectives of the CMP should align with the long-range transportation plan, or LRTP, goal areas. Additionally, I should note here that the CMP committee has been crucial in making the objectives more holistic and comprehensive through their consistent input since the beginning of this update process. Accordingly, the proposed objectives, which will be included in the upcoming slides, have been newly formulated based on goal areas in the Boston region's LRTP, recent congestion data, travel trends, and suggestions incorporated from the CMP committee. Considering that the typical update cycle for the CMP is about 4 to 5 years, these proposed objectives would form a basis for program goals for about that same timeline. Next slide, please. All right, so displayed in the coming slides are the new proposed regional CMP objectives. These have gone through a few iterations from the time they were first formulated, based on detailed feedback received from the CMP committee during the last 3 CMP committee meetings, so committee members here might find them familiar. The objectives have been listed along with the LRTP goal area, or areas, that they align the most closely with. So I'll go through the objectives one by one. They have been proposed as: the first is to make movement of people and freight across the region safer, easier, and more reliable through improvements to multiple modes. Next slide. To set up measures to quantify congestion patterns and formulate traffic performance monitoring systems to determine congestion mitigation strategies in the Boston region. Next, please. To evaluate multimodal transportation networks to enable efficient travel demand management, increase utilization of multimodal facilities, and identify and minimize connectivity gaps in various transportation modes. Next slide. To develop a holistic approach to congestion management by exploring multiple avenues for alleviating congestion, including encouraging mode shift, demand pricing strategies, curb use management, and land use considerations. Next slide. to promote healthy communities by reducing traffic volumes and consequently air and noise pollution arising from transportation, along with reducing fatal and serious injury crashes, paying special attention to vulnerable communities. Next, please. Finally, to promote improved economic vitality, transportation access, public health and safety, and risk mitigation in the Boston region through identification of congested areas and formulation of relevant and sustainable solutions. Next slide, please. So with that, I would like to request the board to approve these objectives as presented today, or maybe come up with any comments or questions. With that, I'll hand it back to you, Mr. Chair, and I'm happy to take any questions, suggestions.
Any questions online? Seeing none, can I get a motion? Second. Accept it today. State the name of the record of meeting. Okay. Motion has been made and seconded. Please call the roll.
David Moeller,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
Yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Josh Ostroff,
Ostroff, yes.
Tyler Terrassi,
Tyler Terrassi, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa, Hannah Switlikowski,
Hannah Swilikowski, yes.
Len Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
Jen Rowe, Nayeli Rodriguez, Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
John Alessi,
John Alessi, yes.
Aaron Shute,
Aaron Shute, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Kristen Guichard, Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Nguyen,
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
Melissa Tantakis, Chris Diorio,
Chris Diorio, yes.
Rachel Benson,
Yes.
Steve Olenoff.
Steve Olenoff, yes.
Is there anyone I have not called? That motion carries. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
David, thanks very much. Capital investment plans. Metro West.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tyler Terrassi. I'm the Government Affairs Officer at the Metro West Regional Transit Authority, and or the MWRTA. So let's get going here with our first slide. You can see we service 16 member communities. We were founded in 2006. Framingham was our first member community, and the most recent community to join our RTA was the town of Hopedale in 2017. All right, let's go to the next slide. So this is a summary of our capital investment planning process. So the RTA develops a 5-year project list every year for the approval of the administrator, which is our SIP. And that project list is submitted to MassDOT through the eSTIP platform. The Black Cat platform is used for the approval of our community transit grant program and our mobility assistance program, otherwise known as MAP vehicle, and for the reporting of those and the invoicing of those programs. Our SIP becomes part of the general TIP, Transportation Improvement Plan, which obviously gets submitted to the MPO. And the TIP becomes the STIP, which is the State Transportation Improvement Program. And that, of course, consists of all the projects approved by the MPO. And we can approve our projects for federal funds through the TRAMS platform at the federal level. Next slide. So this is a summary of our continuous reviews. They include The SIP, obviously, and the Transit Asset Management plan, which is an analysis of our capital needs, and those are annual processes. Our PTASP, Public Transit Agency Safety Plan. We have a committee tasked with reviewing that every quarter. We also have a variety of grant-funded initiatives that include 5307, 5339, 5310, CMAC, among others. Federally awarded funds through the MPO's Community Connections Program allowed for increased service of our micro transit service known as Catch Connect. Specifically, we were able to expand this program to the communities of Framingham and Natick on weeknight evenings between 7:30 p.m. and 10:30 p.m. And we also were able to launch a year or so ago service in the communities of Hudson and Marlborough on weekdays between 6:45 a.m. and 6:45 p.m. We also receive funds through the MPO's Transit Transformation Program. Those funds support the expansion of our vehicle and seating capacity through the purchase of larger compressed natural gas powered Gilligs. This is a much needed upgrade to several of our routes. All right, now let's go to the next slide. This is a summary of our ongoing projects that we have. I want to point out that MWRTA received a total of $3,011,633 in 5307 funds in FY 2025, and we programmed $803,633 for our operating activities. So we currently have a balance of $2,208,000 for our capital activities. And you'll see a list here of our ongoing projects and the years that they're programmed. They include the procurement of Gilligs, which are the larger buses I was referring to earlier, and additional cutaways in FY 2026 to FY 2030. We also have continual state of good repair projects for our Blandon Hub facility, which is the customer transfer facility in downtown Framingham. And also projects at the Framingham Commuter Rail Station, or FCRS, which we manage. Also happening in FY 2026 to 2030. We are also looking to expand our Blandon Hub operations and maintenance facility to have better working conditions and space for our employees and for our storage for our buses. That is happening in FY 2026 to 2028. And finally, I want to highlight a possible passenger transfer facility in or around the Golden Triangle Shopping and Business District, which kind of surrounds Shoppers World, Natick Mall area in downtown Framingham. We're looking to do that in the near future. This is going to include a indoor facility or robust bus shelters for people to wait for the buses. That would be in FY 2028. And we can now go to our next slide here. This is regarding our Gillig expansion initiative that we're undertaking, I alluded to. So this is at $12,600,000 through transit transformation funds, as well as 5307 and RTA Capital, otherwise known as RTA Cap. And as I said before, we want to expand our fixed route vehicle and seating capacity. And we're going to be using compressed natural gas to fuel these vehicles, much cleaner fuel. So these will be considered low and no emission vehicles. And we're really trying to modernize and future-proof our vehicle fleet. So far, we've received 3 vehicles, and we have 6 more currently on order. And we recently held a ribbon cutting ceremony to sort of display these vehicles to the public for the first time. They'll be implemented for service later this spring. We had several representatives join us, including Transportation Secretary Monica Tibbetts-Nutt. We had Senator Karen Spilka, members of our advisory board. We had MassDOT, and also thanks to Dennis Giambetti, fellow board member, for attending as well. And many of them got to ride our buses as well, which was kind of cool. So that concludes my presentation. Happy to take any questions. I don't have specific numbers in front of me, but I'm happy to respond to you through the chair. Get back to you on that. Thank you.
Good morning. I am Felicia Webb, Administrator at the Cape Ann Transportation Authority. Thank you for inviting us, and thank you for Tyler for the overview of our capital planning project process. CATA follows the same process as Metro West for preparing our capital programming. We're just a much smaller RTA. To put our size in perspective, CATA typically receives $700,000 in 5307 formula funding, a good portion of which are used for preventive maintenance activities. So we have historically relied on RTA cap for our capital projects. The Transit Transformation Program through the MPO has been a tremendous help for CATA to fund our needed projects, but also allow us the ability to look forward to projects that we may not have been able to fund. If you want to skip to maybe 5 or 6. Slide 5 or 6. There we go. All right. So funding includes 5307 formula funding, funding through the Transit Transformation Program, RTA cap, and local funds. And then the next slide. In fiscal 26, CATA programmed our regular preventive maintenance activities, and for the purchase of small capital shop equipment, these are regular and reoccurring activities. Some of the projects here were originally programmed into 26, but they appeared on Amendment 10, so they may move back into 25. But this includes the replacement of revenue vehicles that reached the end of their useful life in 2020 and 2022. An AVL GPS project, which is right now CATA has no AVL for customers. We have no way to communicate where the bus is going to be for someone waiting on the side of the road. This will allow us to do that. Automatic passenger counters, and then stop announcements. And then we are continuing our building maintenance project. This is repaving of the parking area, replacement of the garage doors, fuel, fluid systems. Our building was originally built in 1984. It was rehabbed in 2004. So this is just ongoing state of good repair. And next slide. And then 27. It's preventive maintenance, small capital, building maintenance, replacement of vehicles that will reach the end of their useful life in 27. That project may get moved out depending on the actual condition of the vehicle. And then 28, 29, and 30 are pretty much the same. PM, upkeep of the facility, small capital. And then next slide. And then a brief update on existing projects. We are expecting delivery of 4 new revenue vehicles in June of 2025. These were funded through the Transit Transformation Program. Building rehab, we received bids for repaving the parking lot, and we are projecting to issue an IFB for work on the restrooms and plumbing at the end of this month. And then other projects, we have acquired 1 support vehicle, another one should be here in May. Our ADA demand response fare collection, that is included an upgrade of our software systems. And then replacement vans, they were delivered at the end of February. One of them is right there. That is Kata's update.
This period is on your vehicle, you mentioned what's the typical timeline for that?
On a small 29-foot heavy-duty bus, it has traditionally been 10 years. Kata runs hours for 12, a minimum of 12. The vehicles we are replacing in 26 should have been retired, and they're 10-year vehicles that are going to be running 13 and 15 years. They need to be retired at that point in time. You're welcome. Yeah.
Fortunately, I speak loudly, famously, so this should be pretty good. All right, and I got a green light. Good afternoon, morning, everybody. I'm Ethan Lapointe. I'm the Transportation Improvement Program Manager at the Boston Region MPO. This presentation here today is to introduce to this board the federal fiscal year 2026 to 2030 TIP programming scenarios. Scenarios plural. These are the initial scenarios for your consideration today, which at the end of my presentation, MPO staff will be requesting that this board votes to indicate which of the 4 scenarios should be advanced for further discussion. I'll provide a little bit more detail on what that means in a bit. Next slide, we're going to be starting off with an overview on what the content of today's presentation is. Starting off with just defining some objectives, basically building upon what I just said, reviewing some of the materials that are available for this meeting on the MPO meeting calendar, and also, in the case of board members before you, in physical copy. I'll provide a recap on the readiness situation for currently programmed projects on the TIP, along with some updates that staff have received since this slide says March 20th. It should say February 20th in that MPO meeting. I'll also, given there are 4 scenarios before you here today, mention what is consistent between each of those 4 scenarios before then getting into the distinctions between them. Now, these scenarios were presented at last week's meeting of the TIP Process Engagement and Readiness, or TIPR committee. I'll also briefly review what some of the discussion during that meeting led to, though as was noted previously in this meeting, the TIP committee did not indicate a specific scenario that their preference was aligned towards. I'll then get into a summary overall on how each of these different scenarios are different from one another. And then, of course, the main body of this will be discussion. So, on to the next slide, if we can, please. Today's primary objective is that at the end of the discussion phase, at the end of this presentation, staff are going to be requesting that the MPO board votes to select a scenario. Selection of a scenario today is critical to make sure that next week's meeting of the TIP Process Engagement and Readiness Committee, which is going to be at 1 p.m. on Thursday, can actually move forward and develop these scenarios to account for other variables, new projects, or any questions or comments that happen during today's discussion. The scenarios that are presented here today do not cover everything. Namely, these scenarios do not program any new transit projects in federal fiscal year 2026. They also do not program any new roadway projects in federal fiscal year 2030. And just for reference, they also don't program any in federal fiscal year 2029 for any of the new project applicants pursuing a more aggressive schedule. This then takes us into the materials for today, and there's a series of materials. On the next slide, please. Because these are the initial scenarios, we have the initial scenario. There are 4
full programming scenarios available. They're posted in a single file on the MPO's meeting calendar. These are designated as scenario 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D. Now, these are full scenarios because for MPO members who were involved previous meeting on March 6th with Amendment 10 for the federal fiscal years 2025 to 29 tip, these scenarios are also showing project statuses for federal fiscal year 2025, given that amendment is ongoing. It's worth noting there are also consolidated scenarios that summarize some of the smaller line items for easier reading and comparison between the scenarios as well. The main point here between each of the 4 scenarios that are before you is that each one is trying to focus on how to address the deficit that is currently in federal fiscal year 2027 in a different method. Now, before we move on to the recap stage to talk about that federal fiscal year 2027 deficit and how we got here, I do also want to note on the next slide, we have some TIP project descriptions available for every single project that is currently on the TIP, should members seek to reference them as the discussion moves on. And I'd also like to get into a brief mention on some of the public comments that staff have received via email, physical mail, etc., over the past few weeks. So first off, I just want to note for specific projects here that are currently on the TIP. The other day, MPO staff and I believe board members as well this morning received a letter from the city of Boston for the reconstruction of Rutherford Avenue, naturally in support of that project. In addition to hearing earlier from Representative Sicolo for the various projects that are proposed for the town of Lexington, we also received a letter from her office as well. We've received multiple letters from the city of Malden, including Councilor Winslow from the city council for Malden, expressing support for design funding on Route 60 and the Spot Pond Brook Greenway project. And we have received letters from the town of Hingham Select Board for their Route 3A Justice Cushing Highway reconstruction project in federal fiscal year 2026. We've also received a letter from a resident from the town of Marblehead advocating to support the procurement of some bicycle racks through the Community Connections program. Now, we do have 2 further projects where we've received letters from different groups with regard to their sentiment towards the project. From the town of Swampscott, we received a few dozen comments from residents in support of the extension of the Swampscott Rail Trail, along with 3 different letters from abutters expressing concern for the project. And from the town of Belmont, we received a similar showing here with 1 comment from an abutter opposing the project, though a broad variety of comments, another few dozen really, from other residents and potential users of the Belmont Community Path, in addition to what was discussed earlier this morning during the public comment stage of this meeting. So with all of that, I'd then like to move back into the actual readiness topic here on the next slide, recapping going between each of the different federal fiscal years between 25 and 2030. So as far as where we began in this whole discussion, in addition to projected delays out of fiscal 26, this past few MPO meetings, there have also been proposed delays of projects out of federal fiscal year 2025 into federal fiscal year 2026. And this drove a substantial unprogrammed balance in a year that is not covered by any of these scenario discussions. That is subject to the ongoing discussion and upcoming potential endorsement of Amendment 10 to the current 2025 to 29 TIP. That will be presented at the April 3rd MPO meeting. I would also like to note, given Amendment 10's public comment period is ongoing, that we have also received letters of the town of Natick, and I believe there may be one that is a work in progress for the town of Wellesley as well, if I haven't received that one already. That then now takes us into the development scenario window on the next slide with fiscal 26. Because of fairly widespread delays of projects out of federal fiscal year 2026, there was a substantial unprogrammed balance in 26 to the tune of about $65.3 million. That surplus of funding was tempered somewhat by the delays of projects that were delayed out of federal fiscal year 2025 into 2026. A similar situation, however, was not present on the next slide for federal fiscal year 2027. The abundant delays out of federal fiscal year 2026 functionally log jammed in federal fiscal year 2027, given or rather very few projects were proposed to be delayed from 27 to 28. That log jam was to the tune of about $84.7 million of deficit, or an over-program balance of 55.5%. One project was delayed out of federal fiscal year 27 to 28. That was the reconstruction of Route 30 in the town of Weston. With it moving into federal fiscal year 28, the initial deficit that was projected $1 million. Also, because of one project, there were very low contingencies in federal fiscal year 28 to accommodate such a delay. Now, moving on to the next slide, one of the things I'd also like to note here is it's another consideration, as while it wasn't particularly salient to the readiness recommendations made as part of the TIP readiness days exercise, ongoing funding commitments to advance construction funded projects, including new projects that were funded as part of the federal fiscal year 2025 to 29 TIP, and 3 projects that could be classified within major infrastructure, McGrath Highway, Rutherford Avenue, Western Avenue, and Lynn, made it so that the only amount, the funding availability in federal fiscal year 2030 for any new uses this year was 31% of available funding, or about $50 million in that year. This is to say that ongoing funding commitments that this MPO has made in prior TIPs have allocated the majority of any new funding that could be available for new projects. So that was just a summary of where things have fallen for this. But the bottom line on the next slide is that in the outer years of the TIP, based on the readiness scenario, there was very little funding available between federal fiscal year 2029 and 2030 relative to the deficit that had emerged in federal fiscal year 27 and 28. Now, this was all information that was also presented at a previous MPO meeting, but has really set the table for how these scenarios are moving forward. It's also worth noting on this next slide, there have been several items that have emerged as updates between that readiness scenario presentation on February 20th and what we're now presenting here on March 20th. Namely, the initial readiness scenario, when I mentioned widespread delays out of federal fiscal year 2026 earlier, had flagged 7 out of 9 projects for delay out of 2026. Now, since then, MPO staff have been coordinating with project proponents and other stakeholders involved in the project process, including MassDOT and MBTA staff, to reduce that figure to 5 of 9 projects. However, each of these projects are still flagged as being at risk for holding a federal fiscal year 2026 add date. With these projects not being delayed, these 2 other projects out of federal fiscal year 2026, that reduces the anticipated deficit in federal fiscal year 2027. On the next slide, I'm going to start going through these 2 projects. The first is the improvements on Boylston Street in the city of Boston's Fenway neighborhood. Now, as of the readiness scenario, the project was proposed for a delay to federal fiscal year 2027 due to some scope changes proposed to the project. Namely, there was some concern around difficulties in addressing a DCR asset, the Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation owned an asset in the project limits, namely the intersection of Park Drive and Ipswich Street, which was proposed to be addressed here, but given some difficulty in coordinating the project, that section and intersection, I should say, is now proposed for removal of the scope. In addition to the scope change, the city of Boston has also developed a revised cost estimate that takes this scope change into account. Now, given the age of the prior estimate of $8.3 million, this is still a cost increase. The revised, and this is still an approximate pre-25 cost estimate, is at around $10.2 million. The scenarios that are presented before here today have a more refined figure, just given how the project is now approaching a new revised 25%. The city is also targeting a consolidated 75 and 100% design submission for this project as they continue to move forward with District 6, and staff are monitoring progress to hold fiscal 26 closely. On the next slide, for a larger scale project, this was the improvements on Route 3A in the town of Hingham. The project was delayed or proposed for delay originally to federal fiscal year 2027 and was funded following a cost increase of about $5 million to $33.2 million. Now, it's worth noting, as part of coordination around this project, after the town had submitted their 25% design, they had worked with MassDOT District 5 to have MassDOT District 5 basically take over proponent status of the project, with the project scope increasing to address some deferred maintenance and other drainage needs in the project area. That incorporation of drainage into the project scope had then necessitated new permits on the project, hence the risk for the project being delayed into federal fiscal year 2027. And in addition to the increase to $33 million, this new drainage in consultation with the town could cause for further cost changes. Now, given that staff had consulted with the town, and my understanding is that MassDOT has gone even further in coordinating with the town on this project, it is still proposed to hold a fairly firm position in federal fiscal year 2026. Again, coordination remains underway to ensure that this project can be delivered in federal fiscal year 2026. Now, it's worth noting, given there's still some potential risk to hold that 26 add date, The four scenarios that are presented here to the board today spread that $33.2 million between federal fiscal year 2026 and 2027 to hedge, if you will, against a potential delay in a future tip cycle. Only scenario 1C is fully funding that $33.2 million figure in fiscal 2026. Scenario 1A and 1D are consistent in how they do that funding spread on the project. Scenario 1B differs slightly. We'll get into the scenarios in a bit, but I just wanted to note that up front. On the next slide, I do want to note additional development here, and this is actually developed further from beyond what's on this slide. So the Belmont Community Path Project, which is Belmont's component of the Massachusetts Central Rail Trail, first phase, there's a second phase that's also in development, currently is programmed on the tip with a cost estimate of $19.7 million. That's an estimate that was the result of a 25% design submission from the town in 2023. And during tip readiness days, MPO staff have been monitoring some recommendations from MassDOT with regard to potential concerns around the MBTA's right-of-way near the pedestrian underpass or tunnel in the project area, namely the utility access permit. Now, since February 20th, the town has submitted, or I should say since February 20th, staff have learned the town has submitted a 75% design estimate for the project. And with this 75% design estimate, the project has also increased in cost from $19.7 million to $27.3 million. Now, staff have been coordinating with the town, and we believe, I understand that the town has been working with the MBTA and MassDOT, with this cost estimate being indicated as a unit cost and weighted average bid cost increase on the project. It is worth noting in this case, just to be clear here, that the town had submitted the 75% on February 18th. MassDOT did initially reject the 75% on March 6th. However, MPO staff coordinated with the town yesterday to get further information on the nature of that rejection. That was due to a structures report that was omitted from the 75% in consultation with MassDOT, given that the town had pursued a different approach to tunneling in the project. The 75% itself still includes the majority of the project limits, and the town is currently working with their consultant to eventually incorporate that new structure into a revised 75%. Again, coordination is still underway on the project, and based on what we now know, the project is still likely to hold a federal fiscal year 2026 date, thanks to further coordination with the MBTA on this effort. And lastly, for just these four projects here, we have the Main Street reconstruction project in the town of Wakefield. This is a project that is currently listed in the, or was initially presented in the readiness scenarios to the tune of $18.4 million. With a revised cost estimate of $28.5 million as the project is moving towards 25% design over the next few months. The project was initially funded in the federal fiscal years 2024 to 28 tip. Now, this project is one of several efforts that link to one another, to clarify, within downtown Wakefield, each of which were initially proposed for programming in the current tip. The project is currently coordinating with a component of, or what was, the full scope of the Wakefield-Linfield Rail Trail, though that project was phased as a part of development of the federal fiscal years 2025 to 29 tip. Now that there's been further clarification on the phasing of that rail trail effort, and also the proposal of limits changes for some of the roadway reconstruction on this project, these scenarios now reflect the revised cost estimates on the Main Street reconstruction project, though differ somewhat in how that revised cost estimate is addressed. Scenario 1B is going to fund the cost increase on this project in federal fiscal year 2029, whereas others fully fund the project for $28.5 million in federal fiscal year 2028. The town is still working with their consultant, VHB. VHB has the northern section of the Main Street reconstruction, which is what the MPO voted to fund, to provide further updates on this project as it progresses. I do not have a slide after this one for this project, but I did also want to mention, based on some comments made this morning, that the City of Cambridge, in coordination with MassDOT District 6, has also made a request for consideration of some of the surplus funding anticipated in federal fiscal year 2026 to substitute an earmark the city is at risk of losing on their Cambridge Street project. This was a project that was initially funded by an earmark that expires September 30th, and as the project has been moving through the design process, is at risk of not holding a federal fiscal year 2025 add date. The city is therefore requesting that the board consider around $2 million to program the project in fiscal 26. Staff are coordinating with the city to ensure that this request is addressed in a future tip scenario, not necessarily here today. But just to note that if MPO members would like the city of Cambridge to provide additional information on the project, staff are standing by to make that request, as is the city of Cambridge to fulfill it. So on that note, I'd then like to move on to the next slide and talk about what is consistent between these programming scenarios. First off, I want to note on the next slide, a new project that is not a transit project proposed for federal fiscal year 2026. Now, I just mentioned that there were several projects within the town of Wakefield that were part of a coordinated effort for mobility that also spanned into Linfield. Now, to step back a bit to about a year ago, during the development of the federal fiscal years 2025 to 29 tip, due to permitting issues for addressing the entirety of the Wakefield-Linfield rail trail, the project was broken up into several phases. However, that phasing exercise was taken at a time where there was limited funding bandwidth in MassDOT's statewide highway program to address any of the new phases that would emerge on the project. The project was initially proposed, the rail trail that is, for federal fiscal year 2026 of a prior tip. Given the 25-29 tip was in that position, it is currently in federal fiscal year 2029 of the statewide highway program. These scenarios, given advocacy from the town of Linfield here, propose that the project, which is now at 100% design as of a February 6th submission, be incorporated into the regional target program in that year, or in 2026. And again, this is also a request namely from the town of Linfield in consultation with MassDOT, who currently has the project in federal fiscal year 29 and statewide. It's worth noting that this action is being done in exchange for statewide prioritization on the next slide of a regional target project. These are two projects within the city of Chelsea. If we can go on to the next slide, please. One of which, or I should say, where both of these projects were flagged as a result of the readiness days discussion, where 4 projects were proposed for programming in fiscal 27, leading to traffic control concerns among the city of Chelsea. This was resolved in part and discussed between MassDOT District 6 staff, Highway Division Headquarters staff, and also some MPO staff involvement there as well with the city. Now, during readiness days, the project to reconstruct and conduct additional safety improvements on Broadway was proposed for delay to federal fiscal year 2027. Now, the Broadway project was initially programmed in the statewide highway program in a previous tip cycle, but was part of a proposal for regional prioritization of statewide highway projects back in the development of the 2024 to 28 tip. The project is now proposed to return to the statewide highway program in exchange functionally for regional prioritization of the Linfield Rail Trail project. In addition to the Broadway project, the city of Chelsea has requested that the Park and Pearl Street project, which is currently MPO funded in federal fiscal year 2027 and began as a regionally prioritized project, be removed from the federal fiscal year 2026 to 30 tip window to be programmed in next year's tip development cycle in federal fiscal year 2031. Again, it's worth noting we're just discussing up to fiscal 2030 today. The city of Chelsea is aware that they do not have a guaranteed position should they seek to pursue funding in a tip a year from now. The project, it's also worth noting, has not been delayed since Park and Pearl Street, that is, since its initial funding in the federal fiscal years 2023 to 27 tip. This action here, removing 2 projects from regional prioritization in 27, with Broadway going to statewide prioritization and Park and Pearl Street being shifted out to a later tip, reduces the fiscal 27 deficit by $21 million. Scenarios are also consistent on the next slide in how they're going to, how they propose to address design funding on projects. Now, in anticipation of funding surpluses on projects, funding surpluses and their availability in federal fiscal year 2026, and given the discussions that took place during the development of the 25-29 tip, staff had rescored projects that applied last year to the federal fiscal year 2025 project design pilot for consideration in federal fiscal year 2026 in anticipation of potential utilization of those funding surpluses. Each of the 4 scenarios presented here today include 4 new projects for consideration to the tune of $3.6 million. Each of these scenarios, in addition to federal fiscal year 2026 funding, also incorporates a project design set-aside fund starting at $2 million in federal fiscal year 2027 and escalating to $3 million in federal fiscal year 2028 and in further years. Now, This funding allocation going forward would target funding 2 to 3 design projects per year with this set aside, with project solicitation being conducted in tandem with other MPO investment programs. This lower figure than what has historically been proposed in the fiscal 25 design pilot, and also what is proposed as part of this 26 funding proposal, is to accommodate some interest that has been expressed from other MPOs in the Commonwealth in developing their own design programs with TIP, given the centralization of resources at MassDOT to advance these design projects. Something I want to make clear here is that MPO staff have been working extensively with MassDOT staff to try to advance the projects in the design pilot to great success, thanks to the efforts from MassDOT Highway Division staff there. So we want to make it clear that as other MPOs also seek to move this forward, that there's still bandwidth and room there as well. So this can be a stable long-term program. In addition, there's also a risk benefit to having a lower volume of projects within the design pilot. And this is namely because projects that are being proposed for funding for design are also very likely to be moving through the MPO TIP process for construction funding as well. And given some of the risks that we're currently encountering on TIP development, we would not want to propose a situation with design funding that could lead to oversubscription of the TIP relative to design resources in future TIP years. Now, regarding that $3.6 million bundle I just mentioned, over these next few slides, I'll go through the 4 projects that are proposed for inclusion. The first project here, just going in alphabetical order, is the reconstruction of Route 2A 119 Great Road in Acton, spanning from Davis Road to Harris Street, with the Davis Road southern edge being at the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail connection, roughly. This project primarily focuses on vulnerable user safety, an area that currently does not have any sidewalks or bicycle facilities and has a large concentration of existing multifamily housing developments, with the town of Acton currently advancing work on the policy side to change zoning, I believe, within this district to propose in the future the possibility of other redevelopment opportunities. This request here would fulfill about $860,000. On the next slide, as we heard earlier during the public comment stage of the meeting, we also have a request here and funding for the design of a portion of the Massachusetts Central Rail Trail through Hudson, spanning from Felton Street to Priest Street. It's worth noting here, the map that is on screen reflects the request that the town made during last year's design pilot. This is a smaller subsection of that request now. So this map is not entirely accurate, but this request focuses on the downtown part of Hudson. This would extend the Massachusetts Central Rail Trail, should it be eventually constructed, into the downtown, and also provide additional constructions and connections to the Aspet River Trail. The town is currently also pursuing funding for additional extensions of this trail through the Mass Trails program, and MPO staff and town staff have been in contact with DCR, Department of Conservation and Recreation, to coordinate the town's request for TIP funding alongside the town's request for the Mass Trails grant funding as well. On the next slide, we also have a request here with a slight scope modification versus what was proposed last year from the city of Malden for the design of improvements on Route 60. Now, this says phases 1 and 2 from Franklin Street to Lynn Street. Now, when I say phases 1 and 2, the city of Malden had initiated this project with MassDOT across 3 phases. The third phase of the project, which is in Malden Center, running from Malden Center really to Franklin Street, is actually currently pursuing a path with District 4 and MassDOT Highway through the municipal paving program grants, with the remainder of this project proposed to incorporate bus signal priority and other sidewalk level cycle tracks along the remainder of Eastern Avenue, given the pavement condition in that area relative to the section proposed for the municipal paving program. This project has a request of about $800,000 due to this reduced scope. The scope that was proposed last year was about $2.6 million. And has connections to additional transit modes from the MBTA and the Northern Strand Trail. And last but not least, for the 4th design project here, this would be the Broad and Dalton Parkway Corridor project from the city of Salem, with a request for $1.07 approximately million, largely focusing on road diets near adaptive reuse and new housing development proposals in the city, and also focusing on intersection safety improvements for vulnerable road users near Collins Middle School, and then building that connection more closely into downtown Salem. With that, on the next slide, I'd also now like to close out some of the smaller items that are included and are consistent across all programming scenarios. starting with capital projects for bike share. The MPO staff have received 5 requests for bike share projects through the MPO's Community Connections program. Of these 5 requests, 3 seek to replace stations and 2 seek to expand the Blue Bikes network. Just moving in alphabetical order here, there's a request from the city of Boston for bike share replacement for 20 stations that account for 380 docks for about $783,000. The town of Brookline is requesting funding to expand the Blue Bike system by way of 3 new stations in South Brookline and the incorporation of 10 new e-bikes into the system to the tune of about $240,000. The city of Cambridge is seeking replacement funding for 7 stations and 123 new I believe Blue Bikes uses the phrase classic bikes to the tune of about $270,000. The city of Chelsea is the second expansion proposal for 3 new stations, 28 classic bikes, and 3 e-bikes for approximately $1,000. And the city of Somerville is requesting funding to purchase 40 new classic bikes, replace 10 concrete slabs that support their stations, and also replace 40 docks. Now, all in all, between these 5 line items, this proposes 33 new stations. 6 of them are brand new, 27 of them are replacements, and 201 new bicycles for Blue Bikes. This comes out to about $1.5 million of overall funding requested. On the next slide, there's also 2 further Community Connections grant projects that amount to about $480,000 between the 2 of them. One's a fairly small request from the town of Marblehead to procure 22 bicycle racks for $6,250. And the city of Newton has proposed a combined request for bicycle racks, 2 bicycle shelters, and rectangular rapid flashing beacon or RFBs with about 67 bike racks, 2 bike shelters, and 12 RFBs for about $473,000. That is approximately $480,000 in addition to the $1.5 million for Community Connections, putting it just shy of about a $2 million target. So on the next slide, there was a lot of information about what's consistent before we've even gone to the scenarios. So what is consistent? In summary, each of the scenarios that before members here today fund all 7 of the Community Connections projects that staff received requests for thus far. Each scenario also creates a project design set aside for the utilization in future TIP cycles and funds 4 additional projects for design in federal fiscal year 2026 beyond the 2 projects currently in federal fiscal year 2026 that are already funded for design funds, that being the Route 4-225 interchange at Route 128 in Lexington and the Route 126-135 grade crossing project in the city of Framingham. So with these 4 new design projects, that is 6 design projects in federal fiscal year 26. I'd also like to note there's a couple things I did not mention because they're fairly small. Each scenario has a $30,000 set aside in federal fiscal year 2026 to support greenhouse gas monitoring activities for the evaluation of impacts and benefits for greenhouse gas levels on TIP projects. This is being conducted in tandem with the MPO's performance-based planning program with sensors to be procured using TIP dollars to do so. Each scenario is also programming funding for the Linfield Rail Trail Phase 1 in exchange for accommodating that shift to statewide prioritization on the Broadway Safety Improvements Project. I'd also note that transit providers here, namely the Metro West Regional Transit Authority and the MBTA, have indicated support to remove about $5.5 million of funding set aside in federal fiscal year 2027 to address the deficit in that year. Each scenario that is going to be presented here today, just to reiterate what I said earlier, would seek to attain fiscal constraint across each of the 5 years of the TIP. However, they differ in how they do that. Now, these scenarios on the next slide were presented to the TIP committee last week. On the next slide, just to give an overview of what was discussed at the March 13th TIP committee meeting with regard to scenarios. I won't get into any of the rescoring that was discussed there. But the TIP committee last week did conduct some initial discussion on each of the scenarios. And while the committee did not achieve any consensus or majority vote to indicate preference on which specific scenarios could be moved forward, several key points were represented during the discussion. Namely, the scenario constants that I just went through did not flag any or result in any flags as major items of concern. Some members of the committee also indicated preference individually towards scenarios 1A and 1D. other members had also advocated for programming actions that will take further steps to address readiness risks versus what is presented here. Namely, none of these four scenarios are proposing removal of projects from the tip that were not requested either by the city, in this case, City of Chelsea, or projects that were shifted back towards statewide prioritization, also the Broadway project in the City of Chelsea. So besides those two projects, none of these four scenarios are proposing removal of projects, though some members had indicated some interest or preference in exploring that option. So with that, given scenario 1A and 1D came fairly frequently in discussion, the first two scenarios I'll be discussing will be 1A and 1D, starting with 1A on the next slide. Now, scenario 1A at an overview level primarily addresses the federal fiscal year 27 deficit by delaying two projects that are within the city. Yeah. I am receptive to discussion of any option with regard to the readiness scenarios here. So.
How much longer, how much longer will you go?
If you want to be quick, I can go through each of the overviews, and if members during the discussion phase want specifics, I'm happy to provide as well. There are also summaries of actions, I believe, available in the handouts. Yeah, if we can actually jump then 3 slides ahead, I'm going to go into the summary of scenario 1A.
And then when I was with question, at some point, I did have a question on the yeah, so let me finish up. Ask the project question, let anybody else ask the project question, and I'll find you. Ready? Yes. I just wanted to. All right, you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So moving into scenario 1A. 1A resolves the federal fiscal year 27 deficit by focusing on two projects in the city of Lynn, both of which have been moving towards a 25% design, so they're not at 25% design yet, since they were project review committee approved back in December of 2019, I believe. Might be December 2018, I don't have it off the top of my head. Neither of those projects are proposed for removal from the tip, but both are proposed for delay. Major points of scenario 1A, there's a considerable readiness justification to shift a pre-25% design project out to federal fiscal year 2028 or later. The Essex Street project, which is proposed here, would draw resources off of the Western Avenue project to accommodate that delay versus a project that would be located in a different community. There's also the shift of a substantial amount of cost risk on these projects, given they are not at 25% design yet and therefore do not future cost obligations that would need to be made through advanced construction to Western Avenue. Scenario 1A does propose a strategy that is somewhat reminiscent of the approach that was taken for the federal fiscal years 2025 to 29 tip. Now, scenario 1D, fortunately, if we can go jump, I think 4 slides. I'm sorry, 3 slides. Yeah, there we go. Thank you. Scenario 1D is almost identical to scenario 1A. The difference is that the Essex Street project in Lynn would move to federal fiscal year 2028. I'm sorry, can we actually jump 2 more slides? There we go. So scenario 1D proposes that the Essex Street project be delayed back 2 years to 2028, but rather than delaying the Western Avenue project in the city of Lynn 2 years to 2030, this would propose having Rutherford Avenue also be delayed to federal fiscal year 2030 versus the 1-year delay it currently has on the tip. It's worth noting that by shifting Rutherford Avenue back the full extent instead of shifting Western Avenue back, that the Rutherford Avenue cost schedule would go through 2034, assuming the current cost estimate of $200 million hold. Versus scenario 1A, this scenario does not impact projects in the city of Lynn as severely and is more conservative, or I should say, is a little bit less, but still somewhat conservative on project readiness. It also does leave further funding availability in future years of the tip versus other scenarios, but it shifts a large proportion of cost risk into future tip cycles to be addressed, which was a major concern as part of the readiness update back in February. It's also worth noting that it would also leave an unprogrammed balance of $20 million in federal fiscal year 29 if scenario 1D is pursued following a tactic that was proposed in the federal fiscal year 24-28 tip. Rutherford Ave could still have funding in federal fiscal year 2029, albeit at a lower amount than currently programmed at $33.5 million to support mobilization and early construction work. Now, 1B and 1C did not have too much discussion on them, so if I move about 3 more slides through just to go through them quickly. Rather than concentrate on delays in the city of Lynn, scenario 1B proposed widespread delays across a variety of projects in order to attain fiscal constraint. These being Route 1 at University Avenue in the town of Norwood, some rebalancing and distribution of funding between the advanced construction schedule for the Washington Street project in Brookline. It still impacts the construction schedule for the rehabilitation of Western Avenue. It would also propose 2-year delays versus the current plan for a 1-year delay, the Spot Pond Brook Greenway in the city of Malden, and also the Swampscott Rail Trail construction. Worth noting that both the city of Malden and town of Swampscott have provided schedules to MPO staff that indicate that a 2030 add date is not consistent with their current design schedules. In fact, I believe in Swampscott's case, 2028 is actually attainable on the project versus the proposed 29 delay. Scenario 1C, if we can jump a few more slides, to be blunt, moves money around. It does not propose any further delays beyond what is in the readiness scenario. It simply moves funding and shifts obligations between different years of the tip, mostly to later years of the tip. Scenario 1C is very risky in the sense that it allocates the full $33 million for the Route 3A project in Hingham in fiscal 26, which does have some time risks on that project. It does spread money around for the intersection improvements at Route 1 and University Avenue on town of Norwood. It reduces funding in federal fiscal year 27 and 8 for McGrath Boulevard in Somerville, and also shifts the majority of the funding for the Western Avenue project in Lynn into fiscal 2030, leaving it fairly lean in 28 and 9. So closing thoughts before I leave it to discussion. If we can go on the next slide and the one after that. We probably need to go for a little bit. So again, this is the first discussion before this board, though on April 3rd, MPO staff are going to be requesting a final programming scenario. To accomplish that, staff today are going to be requesting a program scenario be indicated, adopted, or developed so that at next week's TIP committee meeting, we can discuss that further to then deliver it for April 3rd. We're targeting a draft release of the 2630 TIP for comment at the April 17th MPO meeting. Now, there's a few outstanding questions here that I'll go over very quickly that these scenarios do not address on the next slide. First off, None of these scenarios that I've presented here today are allocating all of the funding in federal fiscal year 2026. That is to be discussed, or the initial intention here was to discuss that at a later scenario in a later meeting. There's also no addressing of funding that is available in outer years of the TIP and the allocation there and how that should be doled out versus currently programmed or applied for projects. And now just to close out basically on the next slide. Between all four scenarios that are being presented here today, all of them, regardless of what they do, will leave a substantial amount of readiness and cost volatility across all 5 years of the TIP. And I would say that none of the four scenarios presented here today remedy the majority of that risk. Most of the scenarios will also increase risk and especially cost burdens for future TIP cycles. And as I note here, there are other options that can still be explored. And of course, as we get new information on each of these projects, that will be incorporated into scenarios as soon as it is available. So with that, requested action on the next slide, staff are requesting the board votes to select one of these four scenarios for further development.
I just had a couple questions on the one project. First of all, I wanted to understand the reason why now you got to 75%.
Yes, thanks.
Yeah, better that I answer that than Ethan. Yes, the 75% design did not, which includes a box culvert or some structure underneath the tracks to connect to the high school, has been part of the project. Original methodology of how that was going to be constructed was going to be a jacked tunnel, and the MBTA and through the designer came up with, we should do this a different way. Those items, that design is not complete because of some utility work that still needs to be done. And when the 75% submission was forwarded, that piece is not in there. So it's an incomplete submission.
In the second question, it looks like the project's creeped up to another 7.2 million. Is that because of this projected cost of the tunnel?
Unfortunately, Tom, I don't have that specific information today because we did receive a package, we distributed it for review, and then when it was determined that it was incomplete, we kind of pulled it back because I don't want to waste significant resources reviewing it, and we're still trying to troubleshoot that information. Well, I met with Belmont's consultant yesterday, and then some of my team participated in a discussion with the town later in the afternoon. And we have some items to work out with access to do that utility work. So I think if everything goes according to plan, we can still deliver in fiscal 26, and we're supporting that. But I can't specifically comment on the cost because we just didn't consider it complete without the structural work, and any value that's in the estimate, which includes the structure. We haven't finished the structural design, so it's a kind of like a guess at this point.
I remember at one point, a while back, but the thought process I thought we got from Belmont was that this new design would actually lower the cost. I was a little bit surprised to see it going up, and I didn't know if there were any other reasons why that cost went up.
It's a guess, and it's a hope. Projects don't go down. I've been doing this a long time, Tom. They don't go down. Even when we phase them, you think, well, phase one, it's $10 million. When we break it into two phases, and it still comes in, phase one is 10 plus million, and then yes.
I know, we're still in full support of the project. I was just trying to get a better understanding.
No, understood.
Because at this late date, and it's not just this project, I'm not really singling out Belmont, because we do support the project. But we've seen other, and this is gonna go to my motion in a few minutes. It's just difficult at this late stage and where we're trying to get the tip across. finish line to be hearing about these, delays
Mhm.
and additional costs. So it's gotta be, it puts a lot of burden on staff. It's frustrating to this board to be dealing with these things constantly. But I just want to get a better feel for what was going on in that.
Sure.
We still support the project and we want to see go forward.
Thank you.
Any other project is important? I also. But that gets back out, yeah. That the updated cost of funds that we look for, and all these will be prepared and rendered. Where it is. This is both discussed today. Let's we just got done that he meant to so with that, so all of that is right. That's the reason, but the number is 27.3, but again, it's a result of the number. And it's $27.3 million number that is based on some close number for what is under fund. We're not incurring, not incurring, yeah. Other questions? Dave, Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Couple questions on wind projects. 'Cause those seem to be kind of sticking out as, they're very near term, but they're not yet 25% submitted. Do we, I mean, they're good projects. Wynn's doing a lot with development. They're very deserving of these projects. I want to make sure we're not taking on too much risk by pretending they'll be ready in a year when maybe that's not realistic. Do we have any better schedule on those just to give us some, confidence that pushing them out a year is realistic? Yeah. And I apologize. Rich, you may have covered this already and I might have missed it.
Okay, which one in particular? Essex Street first?
Well, I think both projects are pre-25, right?
Excuse me?
Both projects are pre-25%.
So the 25% for Essex Street is probably being submitted as we speak.
Okay.
All right, so that one, and the other thing too is
Yeah.
I just want to point out that there's been a lot of activity on these projects, although they may not be at 25%. They're in dense urban settings. They're very complex. There's been a lot of community outreach. All of those things have been going on. Essex Street, for example, there was a lot of discussion about the cross section and bicycle accommodation, all those sorts of things. So so that project is, as I literally, it could be submitted as we speak. So that's happening.
Thing is on that note, and I completely agree with you. First 25% is the hardest part. But we're talking about program in 27. Is that?
Currently program is 27. I think the scenario is moving to 28.
Okay. That seems reasonable.
And in discussions with the city,
Yeah.
they're in support of moving it to 28. The biggest concern, obviously, is we get to August of 27, right away is not complete, and we're struggling to get it advertised in the fiscal year by September. This obviously provides a little bit of a cushion because whether the project advertised in September or November of the following fifth year, it's still a spring construction stuff. So
28 seems reasonable to cover it.
yeah.
And then the other one's Western.
Western Ave. So Western Ave obviously is a tremendously complex project, about 2 miles long. There's been a lot of discussions with the NBCA, there's been a lot of discussions with Mass DOT. That project right now is currently scheduled for its 25% submission right around 4th of July. So I think that's,
And now it's programmed around 20, what year is that program for right now? Sorry, what year is that program for right now?
it's currently programmed in 28,
Okay.
but it's programmed over several fiscal years. 30. And I think the various scenarios show that moving out to 29, again, I think on behalf of the city, they would obviously prefer to keep it in 28, maybe the funding shift a little bit. And that's the other thing too, I guess that's probably a question about this as well, in that if the project is completely funded in 1/7 fiscal year, it's unlikely that the contract is going to be finished in 1/7 fiscal year. So and the project of that magnitude, I think it's currently programmed for around $47 million.
don't know if I can ask you to answer this. Is the town, funding in place from the town to complete design, or is there any question of whether the town can?
No, the town, the city of Lynn has allocated those funds. As a matter of fact, right now, we're trying to give them an assessment, although early on, as to what the right-of-way cost might be. As we know,
Right.
Ferry Street in Everett, there was about $1 million worth of right-of-way just associated with applying those easements. So we're trying to give them a heads up as to what they need to do in terms of programming or budgeting
Yep.
future funds as well.
I appreciate it. Thank you. These are complex projects, so I just want to put it on the table. Thank you.
So obviously, we're early in the process of right-of-way. Once we get the 25% design plans, we know that there's the preliminary right-of-way plans that are submitted with that. They're further refined as we get through the design process. One of the benefits of the Weston Ave project is there's a lot of properties that are right up to the back of sidewalk. So we're anticipating that some of the temporary easements would be limited simply because there's no place to go. It's also a very confined right-of-way with established intersecting streets and so forth. So again, trying to take, we're not going to take a building, for example. There may be some questions of, do we need waivers and that sort of thing? But certainly we're a little early in that process. I think in terms of Essex Street, I don't have a number yet on how many temporary or permanent easements there are, but the city of Lynn just went through a process on the Broadway project. And there was easements and acquisitions associated with that project. They learned a little bit from that project, and so they're starting an early public outreach and engagement process in Lynn. We've already had several meetings on the Essex Street project. We've had some on Western Ave. There's another one coming up on the Western Ave project that is coming up on May 14th. So we want to keep the public engaged and help them understand what's involved with the project. But I don't think there's any major type of acquisitions that would be necessary. They're not going to take a building down, that sort of things. I hope I answered your question. So that's been a big part of all these initial meetings, the over-shoulder review and meeting with Mass DOT to try and get a sense of what will be part of the project. There was just recently a big meeting with Mass DOT and the MBTA relative to floating bus stops. So the right-of-way is established. It's not like we would be expanding the footprint of the right-of-way or the roadway. Weston Ave, fortunately, is pretty wide already. So it's a question of how are we accommodating bicycle lanes based on the ADT of the road. Those bicycle lanes is very specific as to how they would have to be treated and that sort of thing. But everything is working within the right of way, fortunately. Essex Street was a little bit different because it's very, very narrow in some spots. And we have met with Mass DOT's Complete Streets group and they have already discussed a waiver for that in order to make to allow that project to move forward. It's just physical constraints just don't allow it. I have time for 70 or 80 more questions, so just.
Okay, no holding it down. The more along kind of information sharing, the board did kind of make a request to project proponents to share updated schedules for projects in advance of this meeting. And I don't believe we've got that information from Lynn. We are hearing it now today, but I think it's hard to kind of understand and digest all this information the day of. Curious about like if that was received and yeah, if you could speak a little to that.
Real quick.
Okay.
So, I can't speak for, the city or the planning department, whether they received that request, but we have very detailed information that I can provide that to Ethan and he can get that off to you relative to, scheduled updates for the project, when we expect certain submissions, when we expect the design public hearing, all of those things. And as part of the 25% design, and even in advance of that, Mass DOT requires a very detailed schedule, as we all know, that has every component of the project. So I can provide additional information for Ethan. He can get that to you.
I actually had one more question for Mr. Benevento, but it might be a quick one. So I believe I heard earlier that
The MPO hiring?
I believe I heard earlier that the city was, okay, delaying the Essex Street project to a future fiscal year. I just didn't know if they had any thoughts on the proposed delay for Western Avenue in scenario 1A.
So I looked at the various scenarios as well. Obviously, they're okay with Essex Street moving up as I described. They would prefer to keep Weston Ave in 28, maybe at a reduced number, other than what was actually initially programmed. But if it accommodates helping balance the tip cycle for the next tip cycle, I think they would be okay with that. Again, I think they would prefer to keep it where it is, just because it's advancing quickly. And it's a major project for the city and regionally significant. So,
thank you.
Back a few years ago, the MPO had a subcommittee that then, and at that point in time, we were, we basically said that we wanted only 60% budget, like 25%. But in that we would give a break here, a period of time because we wasn't the other projects that a lot of time. So part of what I thought is, especially with, what's been going on with this quick cycle, and what we see is a huge quick cycle. I'm kind of great theory, so, I think it's time that we finally make decisions on what we're doing with projects and how for us to be in as well. What I was gonna do was ask for a motion, directing the fifth process engagement readiness meeting to recommend to the full board a set of expectations for our proponents of projects programs in the fifth region side. So basically, I'd like to see the typical committee come back with their recommendations as to what their thoughts are on this. So then the board can finally vote on, what we expect out of, all the proponents when we're considering things to go on to the. Thank you for question for you. Are you doing this for the community project, or are you consider in terms of how we grapple with the current project? I think with so much going on in this cycle, we would like to have that discussion after the, just so that the opponents know coming into the next cycle. This is where so, that would be plus I felt with the typical committee doesn't happen quite right now. You're dealing with all kinds of different things coming up. Timeline so it's driving.
I mean, I'm supportive of that because I think a lot of this is gonna change. In fact, even the information that's coming in is changing this. And even if we were to approve this like scenario today, the next time we grapple with this, it is very likely that many of these projects are not going to be ready. And as you can just see in the amount of funding that's available in every year, I mean, it's going to create a domino effect. And I think we're essentially at the point, probably this year, but definitely next year, where we're just not going to have room anymore. And we are going to have to probably take a project or two off the tip, or say something like, you know, we'll consider you for the outer year, you know, come back. But I think that's the other thing too, is when we think of programming projects for 2030, you know, do we even want to program anything? Or do we want to leave a healthy amount of unprogrammed funds, because we're probably going to have to push projects back and create that domino effect. So I do think that we need to get serious, and whether we do it this year or whether we spend a little more time and be a little more, what's the word? You know, thoughtful about how we do that, makes sense to me. Ethan, can I ask you a question? Do you have design status on all the projects that are currently in the tip?
I have design statuses reflecting what is currently in project info as of about 2 weeks ago,
Right.
besides the Belmont Green Path projects.
And with all due respect to my friends in the consulting community, approaching 25, nearing 25, almost at 25, moving to 25, it's pre 25%. Right? So how many tip projects are we currently programming that haven't achieved 25%? Thank you. There's gonna be a follow-up question, Ethan, about how many of them, what years they're in. They'll be ready.
1/3. 25. Okay, so the projects that are at project review committee stage only, there are currently 7 projects listed. The earliest, based on the current is rehabilitation of Essex Street and Lynn, which is currently in fiscal 26, the proposed lease scenario 27 or later. Project that is not impacted by any scenarios is the next one, which is bridge preservation of Cambridge Street in the city of Boston. That's currently programmed fiscal 27. Park and Control Street was not at 25%, but proposed removal. Rehabilitation of Washington Street, I think was just submitted, but that is currently still on my presentation. I'm not sure. Oh, I'm sorry. Apparently my voice was not catching there. So just for the record, the projects that are closest in scenarios are 26, rehabilitation of Essex Street, bridge preservation Cambridge Street over MBTA, rehabilitation of Washington Street in Brookline, Main Street reconstruction, Wakefield, Spot Pembroke Greenway in Malden, rail trail construction for Swampscott Rail Trail, Swampscott, and rehabilitation of Western Ave in Lynn. Road Route 126 in Bellingham and Argilla Road in Ipswich.
Okay, so now I'm confused, because when you made your presentation, you said that Boylston Street in Boston approaching 25%. Is it at 25% or not?
It has a revised 25% design submission from 2021, but it's creating a new 25% design revision.
Ah, so it would show on your list as 25% approved?
25% revised revision 1, but yes.
Right, so here's the other thing. We need to decide what we mean by 25%. If 25% submitted, in which case you would think that Belmont's at 75%. There's 25% approved, at which case you would think Belmont is not at 75%. If it's 25%, we submit 75. The MPO needs to figure out what we mean when we say these things. For MassDOT purposes, a project that has been returned to the consultant for redesign at 25% or at 75% or at 100% is at the lower level of design. It's right. For our purposes, Belmont is at 25% approved, 75% submission. Right. For our purposes, Boylston Street is at 25% design. That design is from 2021 and was a revised design then, right? I'm just none of this is, I'm not trying to attack anybody's project, but I'm mindful of Tom's point, but I'm also, you know what? The time for whatever Tom said, the grace period is over, but apparently it's not, because we're going to extend it another year. Okay, we have a fundamental problem that projects are never removed from the tip, even if they do not advance. We just keep sliding them, and then all the people we solicit projects from, cities and towns, okay, equally important to the MPO. We solicit projects. They do all that work. They come to us and say, "Hey, we think we'll be ready in 29," and we go, "Yeah, we don't have any money in 29 or 30. Maybe we'll see you in 31." I just have a problem with that. I don't have a solution. I I don't know what to do about this. Game on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, a question that relates to this, and was for John at the Tipper meeting, and John stepped off. And it relates to how MassDOT, like, at what point MassDOT sort of takes a project in its full for review. So we do PRC review, community then moves forward and submits a design. At some point, there's a design deadline, right? MassDOT sets a deadline and say your 25% plans are due on such a date of that. Fair or?
Yes, yes and no.
Okay.
So let me, just to clarify, when a project is approved at PRC, the community is alerted that their project has been approved, not a guarantee of funding, but that the clock starts on a 24-month cycle that they need to not achieve 25%, but they need to solicit, get a consultant on board, start the process, and they have to demonstrate that to us, that within that 24-month period that they've initiated and advanced the project. We don't have a deadline per se to get to 25%.
I wonder if this is sort of a joint effort, right? Like where we can.
You want to add more process to our process?
Well, no, but I want to kind of.
No, the only reason I want to make that distinction.
Yeah.
And I don't know disrespect to the consultants and the designers for the communities in the rooms, but and I'll echo the chair's comment, approaching 25% is being submitted. There's a lot of effort that goes into that part of the project, but in essence, as much as coordination has ongoing or public outreach, it still hasn't been blessed.
Right.
And that's probably not the right word, but it has not yet been accepted. The cross-section, the specific design hasn't been accepted by the rest of my team. And it's a big team. It's a lot of different entities.
And it's not ready for a 25% public design.
Right. It's not ready for public hearing.
We approve it, we take it to a public design, public gets to talk about it, changes are made based on that discussion. anything before that is just internal MassDOT consultant work and city council. Okay, but you know, there's a 25% approved. That means something to us.
Right, and that's the crux of the issue, right? So there's the first real check-in, the first real check-in on MassDOT is at 25%. For that, it's really 100% on the community to advance it to 25%. Right?
Well, we do have, I don't want to call them milestones, but we do have touch points with the design, with the community. We do an over the shoulder. We will we'll program the project with the community, or we've offered to program the project with the community, although they, you know, they understand this is what we're planning to do, but I'll get my program team to work with the consultant and the community on the design, the specifics and what we're looking for along that corridor, location, et cetera. Then we do an over the shoulder, and we may have a pre-25 with our design team because to concur that we're going in the right, that the design is going in the right direction. But they're not necessarily milestones that I can track and pinpoint every one of those.
Right. Yeah, and I just bring it up to address these projects that have been sort of pre-25 for, in some cases, like a decade, and I'm not singling anybody out, but there's several of them. That kind of, where do we apply that pressure and that accountability, and who do we, I'm not saying it's on you, right? I'm saying
Right.
it's, you know, where's the correct place to place the deadline? Is it at the MPO? Is it through your process? Which one would bring that accountability in the most effective way to get into 25? After 25, I think everything changes, right? Now you've got a lot more parties looking at the project, you get a lot more factors. That's different.
There's one item I want to comment on, Jay, is that if a project is not on the tip, if it hasn't been programmed by the MPO, whatever region, there's a design review schedule for those projects based on where they are. If it's a current year or a year one project, it has a 30-day review. If it's beyond year 1, 2, 3, 4, it has a 60 or 90-day review. So my team doesn't necessarily look at it and say, it's not funded, we're not reviewing it. It's just, we would look and see it's not in the tip. So it doesn't take priority over something that's currently in the tip that has a, you know, a fuse on it.
And where that also factors in is if we were to remove a project and say, we'll program it next year, that does move it down the priority list on your end too. That does.
It would change the review time from a 30-day review to a 60 or 90-day review.
But it's important.
And it's just because there are many projects, and we have to prioritize as best we excuse me, best we can based on our resources. And, you know, my team knows the projects in the current year or year 1, and there's a problem, they elevate it to me so I know what the problem is. And I will reach out to the designer, I'll reach out to the community, or I'll work with David, you know, the chairs team and planning, and say, we have an issue we have to resolve, or we need to get back to the community consultant or who that proponent is, and say, we have a problem, we need to get this moving.
Thank you, John.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, for being long-winded.
No worries. Jen?
I just wanted to make a note, kind of what jumped out at me from this conversation here is that part of the challenge we're having is that there's not a lot of information, consistent information we're receiving about projects if they're not in the first or second year of the tip. And so I think one of the things we need to figure out is how do we get that information to the board about those projects and whose responsibility is that? Because I think right now, a lot of that is falling on MPO staff, and they certainly do a fantastic job, but I have absolutely no idea how they managed to bring all of this information to us, but it's coming, you know, late because it's up to them and the project proponents. So I think part of what I maybe see benefit to is coming up with a bit more of a clear expectations, as Tom was speaking to, of project proponents to share that information with MPO staff, regardless of what year it is on the tip, to share that information with MassDOT as well. And also maybe and I think there's a lot to flesh out because there's a lot of complexity here, but kind of consistent guidelines as to what is realistic what is a realistic year beyond that. That might vary a bit depending on the size and complexity of the project, but I think there's some fair consistency so that we aren't left as we are frequently and today with a situation where we're having to rely upon us asking questions of the municipalities and the consultants, and we don't have a whole lot to kind of verify that information. So we need to figure out a system to make that information about private programs that we have every year and put the onus of that on the private.
Eric?
One factor I would like us to consider in this is how long have you been programmed on the tip? Because I know there's a few projects that I think are approaching about 10 years that they've now been programmed and they're just not making progress. And, you know, I think it's really hard following up on what Jen's saying is for us to discern kind of who's at fault for why the project is not advancing. Is it purely, the municipality and they're just not doing what needs to be done? They don't have the capacity. Is their consultant, too busy, not able to give them enough time? Is it MassDOT is, adding new thing, we've heard from Hingham, for example, that they're upset because some of the district offices added things to the project. So I think it's hard for us to understand kind of who's at fault, but I do think that projects that have been on the tip for a really long time are projects that we probably need to be asking, harder questions and evaluating. So I think that would be something, and Ethan, I know you showed that, I think, in some of the previous documents, but something to maybe highlight as we have this conversation, Tom.
Thank you. Other questions, other comments? David Kozis.
So I appreciate the conversation. I'm absorb it all. Maybe Ethan, could you go over it now? Are there any projects in the scenario, let's say, in 26 or in 27, that are not at 25%?
Yes.
Maybe if there are, then like the proponents and the shipper, I'm not sure when, sometimes there's.
Ethan?
Yes, so already included in these scenarios is the Essex Street reconstruction project in Lynn, which is not at 25%. That was initially programmed for fiscal 26. Scenario 1A proposes pushing that to 28. In fiscal 27, the rehabilitation, it's listed as a preservation for the Cambridge Street Bridge in Charlestown, but the proposal to, I believe, a partial deck replacement in the city of Boston. That is currently in fiscal 27, also not at 25%. I do not believe we have anything that is at project review committee approved, no 25% design submission or received besides those two. We have a much larger number of projects that have a 25% received, but not approved. There's about 12 projects on the tip that have a 25% submission that is yet to be approved.
So we need to decide what we're doing. We need to get something approved today so Ethan can move and do his work. Does anybody have a motion on a scenario or on projects to do something with?
Yeah, I had that motion out.
Did you make a motion?
Yes. Yeah, I made a motion.
What's your motion?
Okay, motion would be directing the TIP process engagement readiness committee to recommend to the full board a set of expectations for the components or project programs in the TIP regional target program.
Next year?
Yes.
Not to be applied to this year. Is there a second? Is there discussion? Please call the roll.
Roll call, David.
No.
David.
No.
No. John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, no.
John Romano,
I don't know.
Josh Ostroff,
Ostroff, no.
Tyler Terasi,
Tyler Charleston, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee abstain.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Hannah Switkowski, Len Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
Jen Rowe, Naomi Rodriguez,
Yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis, John Alessi,
John Alessi, yes.
Aaron Shute,
Aaron Shute, yes.
Tom Bent,
Yes.
Kristen Gishard,
Kristen Gishard, yes.
Dennis Giambetti, Darlene Nguyen,
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
Melissa Christiorio. Christiorio, yes. Rachel Benson,
Rachel Benson, yes.
Steve Olenoff,
Steve Olenoff, yes.
and I call on two others. Is Melissa Tintopoulos on the line to vote? No, okay, thank you. And then just returning back to Dennis Giambetti. Also not on, thank you. Your count.
Passed. I can do that. I don't know the total vote, but I can tell it passed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is let's approve a scenario. Does anybody have a scenario they'd like to approve and let staff go to work? Eric Barassa.
I'll make a motion to advance scenario 1A.
Is there a second? Tom Bent makes a second. Is there discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Calling the roll for David Muller,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Josh Ostroff, Tyler Terasi, Sarah Lee,
Sorry, I can't hear you. I think you're calling me, Sarah Lee, yes.
thank you. Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Hannah Switkowski, Len Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
Jen Rowe, Naomi Rodriguez, Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis, John Alessi,
John Alessi, yes.
Aaron Shute,
Aaron Shute, yes.
Tom Bent,
Yes.
Kristen Gishard, Dennis Giambetti. Oh, pardon me. Next to Darlene Nguyen.
Darlene, when I just want to comment, I don't prefer that this only affects one community, but I also understand that the community is okay with this, so I vote yes.
Christiorio. Christiorio, yes. Rachel Benson
Rachel Benson, yes.
and Steve Olenoff.
Steve Olenoff, yes.
Motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Is there any other business that come before the MPO at this time? Is there any member items? Seeing none, are there any meetings after this? Any MPO people?
Not today.
Nothing today. The next meeting of Tipper is next week? All right, so Tipper's next week, but they're not talking about the motion. They're talking about this actual work we're doing now. And then our next meeting is 2 weeks from today in the boardroom, 10 o'clock. I think it's also scheduled to go a little long, so please be mindful. And it is in person, but there will be a virtual option. Can I get a motion and a second to adjourn, and please state your name for the record?
Eric Brass, a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? Thank you. Any objections? Without objection, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much. Great job, staff.